What is up, boys and girls? I'm Gunner, this is Misplaced Minis, and you are welcome. Today, we're going to be bringing you what I believe is the easiest, fastest, most zero-skill, beginner-friendly, large-scale leather tutorial that you will find on the internet. What do I mean by large-scale? So we're focusing on leather that takes up 50% or more of your minis, and I know there's a lot of leather in the scabbards and the pouches and the belts, and we'll cover that in a separate tutorial, but this specifically is for those large-scale pieces, those centerpieces for your model. And this entire paint job took less than 30 minutes, and that's from a beginner painter. That's not somebody with 20 years saying, oh, it's super quick. This is legitimately fast, and we're gonna be giving you off-ramps, this little symbol right here, which tells you can stop your paint job here if you like the way it looks, and then call it done. And we'll also be giving you the TTRP, or Tabletop Ready Plus, that's going to allow you to take a couple extra steps that may add just a little bit more time, but are going to make it look just that much better. So the choice is yours, use it how you want, but in the end, I guarantee you're going to have a phenomenal looking leather cloak, cape, duster, whatever, and you're going to be happy with it. Let's get into it. And if you guys are wondering what I'm painting, this particular mini comes in the starter pack for Puppets War. They're a great provider of proxy STLs for the Warhammer community. I really like their aesthetic. It's that flat armor panel. It gives it a lot of depth that some of the other proxies don't have. I'm not sponsored them, by the way. I just really like their stuff. Plus, it comes with a variety of options when you do get their packs. I print a lot of their stuff because I really enjoy the way it looks. So check them out, link in the description. They're a good company. If you're wondering why there are support marks on it still, for those of you that are very observant, it's because I do 3D printing videos also, specifically resin testing, and I literally have dozens of these laying around on my desk. So I just picked this one up and thought I'd use it. I have two minis that I've done with this tutorial. So the first is this fully painted mini, and as you can tell, it's a little bit darker, it's a little bit more modeled, a little less saturated paint job. And then this, which is the one that I'm presenting now, is a little bit lighter, a little bit more worn. So this really shows the versatility of this particular paint job and what you can get out of it with just a few changes. And this technique really shines in a couple ways. One is that we do all our pre-shading before we even put any color on the mini. So what does that mean? That means the pre-shading is going to be universal. We're using grays over a black prime, and we are going to add a little bit of color, but again, that's kind of optional just to change the tone. With the grays, you can change the paint color and get a completely different effect without having to redo a bunch of steps or try to figure out what colors work well together. The second is that because we're doing all our pre-shading and really we're getting our color and vibrancy from our contrast paints, changing out the colors does not require a lot of thought. If you're starting with the standard Rhinox hide and working up to Mournfang brown, and then you're going to Ashanti bone, if you want a different color, you need to change all three of those paints. Otherwise, it's not going to look good. With this, if you change one paint, you're going to get an entirely different spectrum. Yeah, your edge highlighting, you're going to have to change that paint maybe, or maybe you can keep it what it is. But at the end of the day, it's much easier to find a look that fits when you're using contrasts, vice layers, or base paints to get your color. Okay, so jumping right in, we're going to start with dark warm gray for Pro Acryl over a black prime, and you're going to use this as your mid-tone, and it's not super important to get it even. You're just going to put it on a sponge, dab off most, and then you're just going to apply it to the model in places where you want the leather to be a little bit brighter. And now we'll lighten it up a little bit with bright warm gray mixed in 50-50, and you're going to do this in the uppermost surfaces or where the wear is going to be a little bit more extreme. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, just go with what feels good and what you think you want the leather to look like when it's all said and done. After that, we're going to come in with straight bright warm gray, and we're just going to be dabbing this on the very uppermost surfaces and the areas that are going to get the most attention as far as modeling and where you want the leather to be the lightest. Again, this is by feel, and if you want to skip this step for darker leather, you can do that too. Also, you notice I'm not concerned about getting it on the armor panels themselves because I'm going to paint those after, but if you've already painted your armor panels, feel free to tape them off or use some masking putty. Now you can stop here if you want, but if you want to punch it up a little bit, take a dry brush, get it damp, and then come in with your bright warm gray and sort of stipple that in places where you want it to look mottled. It's important to still have a little moisture on the brush because that'll give you these nice big dots that'll transition well. Then once it dries out, you can do a little bit of dry brushing and just put some varied patterns where you want them. Next, we're going to come in with some bright yellow ochre, and we're going to do essentially the same thing, making sure that the brush is mostly offloaded and then just stippling the paint on. As you can see, it was a little more damp than I wanted it to be, so I just wicked it off with a finger and carried on. This is going to give a little bit of color and a little bit of depth for the contrast paints. If you want to skip this step, perfectly acceptable. Or if you want to change the color for orange, red, or something that's going to give a little bit different end result, feel free to do that as well. Similarly on here, I go until it gets a little bit dry, and then I do some dry brushing with it to just give some streaks, some depth, and a little bit of contrast once the paint goes on. Another optional step is to take a hard bristled brush. Here I just have a cheap brush that I cut down, and I'm going to do it in the very similar fashion as the last brush. I'm just going to wick most of it off, but I'm going to come in here and I'm going to stipple these larger dots that are going to give even more contrast. Again, if you don't like it, just wick it off with your hand, and then as it gets dry, we're going to do some more dry brushing. We're just going to focus on high spots. This will give very severe results, so if you're not looking for that, feel free to skip it, but I like the way it turns out. And I know it doesn't look like much now, but it's important to trust the process because this is going to turn out great. And here's where we start to make magic. I mix snakebite leather and transparent brown 50-50, and then I add in 1 drop of contrast medium for 2 drops of each of those. I'm also going to do a separate color that's 1 drop of contrast medium and 2 drops each transparent black and transparent brown, which is going to give us a much darker color. And don't worry if you don't have these particular paints. You can swap in any contrast-like paint from pretty much any provider, whether it be Army Painter, Pro Acryl, Citadel. You're going to have similar results. And if you don't have contrast medium, you can also use glaze and wash medium from Pro Acryl, and there's several others out there that are going to do the same job. Now, as you notice, I'm starting with the light brown, and I'm putting a very generous coat over the entirety of the leather. I'm not being super careful around the armor pieces because, again, I'm going to paint them later. But if yours are already painted, just be a little more cautious when you are applying it. After that, I take the darker color and I wet blend this in to the lighter brown, and I just do this randomly. I focus kind of on areas that are like underneath his arms and the lower parts of the duster, areas that I think are going to want to look a little bit darker, but there's really no right or wrong way to do this, and wet blending them together is going to give you a much more mottled transition. If you want a more stark transition, you can let this coat dry and you can go back in with each one of the colors and put them on separately, and it'll give you a little bit more dramatic change from dark to light. Also, don't forget the inside of whatever you're painting. It's not necessary to pre-shade this. You can take your light brown and just put a single coat over the primer. It's going to read as very dark brown, which is what you want for areas that are hidden, essentially away from the light source. Now just let it dry and see how you feel. And if you want to stop here, you definitely can. Now I know I said 0 skill painting, but there is some edge highlighting in this, but don't panic. This is slightly different edge highlighting, and this leans more towards sloppy edge highlighting because it adds to the wear and the kind of weathered look of the leather itself. So if you don't have a super steady hand like I don't, then this really isn't going to be a problem. If you make mistakes, and you'll see me make a few here where I kind of overshoot, just leave them and it's going to give it a kind of weathered look. We're going to mix Mournfang brown with dark orange brown, and we're going to do edge highlights. And this I do with a slightly drier paint consistency than most. It goes on a little bit slower and a little bit sloppier, but I think that adds to the overall texture. Then once your brush is too dry to do edge highlighting, just double check that most of the paint is offloaded. Then you're going to do essentially what is dry brushing over various parts of the model, focusing a lot on raised surfaces, folds, and where that would wear, but you can also do it over flat surfaces as well, whatever you feel works best for the model to give it that really worn look. And if you're worried about ruining your brand new Kolinsky sable, you can definitely buy a cheap brush and it's going to do the exact same thing. At this point, it's just rinse and repeat, going back and forth between your edge highlighting and your dry brushing. With the edge highlighting, if you're not super steady or you don't feel super precise, that's fine. Don't worry about it. As you can see here, I make a mistake. It's fairly easy to just wick it off with your thumb. But if you make a mistake, take a look and see if it's something that's going to add to the texture. As you can see here, I make a mistake, I decide to keep it, and I move on with my edge highlighting. Once the edge highlighting is too dry, go back into your dry brushing and hit the areas you want to look distressed. Now I know we're going for realism here, but it's important to find anywhere where there's a distinct difference between panels or flaps and edge highlight the edges of those to really make them stand out. If there's an edge you can't get to with the side of your brush, just wait till it's mostly dry and then drag it across that edge. Now you can end it there, but if you really want to push the realism, we're going to come in with edge scratching. That is adding just a little bit of moisture to the paint and offloading almost all the paint before we put it on the model and just dragging it down in small, tiny scratches along the surface. As much as you can, make these scratches random. It'll help push the realism and really sell it as leather. It's also important to consistently check the tip of your brush to make sure there's no dried paint. After edge scratching, I go back in with an offloaded brush and I do these small scratches all over the Mini, especially in areas that are flat and don't have a lot of visual interest. I do this by lightly dragging the tip. You'll see I kind of work my way up to the Mini to get nice straight lines. Every now and then you're going to make a mistake like that. Just go ahead and wick it off and you'll be good to go. Also, there is a particular technique that I like to call edge nicking. I don't know if anybody else does this. I haven't really seen it, so I'm just going to name it. Essentially what this is inverting the paintbrush or turning it around from edge scratching. And whereas scratching, you use the tip to drag across the edge, creating those little scratches in the edge. This one, you use the bristles themselves to give you those scratches. Now, this does take a little bit of practice, and you're going to have to offload most of your paint on the brush. I wouldn't start out with this. I would use this once your edge highlighting has dried up, essentially on the brush. And by turning it around and pressing it down on the edge, you're going to notice that those bristles flex out. And if the paint is the right consistency, a little bit dry, not a lot of moisture, not a lot of paint left on the brush, those bristles are going to spread out and leave individual bristle marks across the edge. I've found this to be a more natural looking kind of scratch and nick because it's completely random. It doesn't require you to plan out the scratches, which honestly most people tend to make them pretty even because once you get in the flow, it's just easier to do that. So it brings a little bit of realism and it's really easy once you kind of figure out the consistency of the paint that you're putting down. And at this point, you're just going to go around the Mini using this edge nicking technique till you get the desired result. And there you have it. Ultra realistic leather, fast, under 30 minutes, easy, zero skill, no advanced techniques, and it's gonna look great on the tabletop, I promise. So if you like what you saw, hit the subscribe button, hit that bell so you get notified when I drop more content. I'm gonna be doing these videos as long as you keep watching them, and I hope you got something out of it. As always, I'm Gunner, this has been a video, and we'll catch you in the next one.